In this video, you're finally going to use React to render some content to the DOM. Currently, everything that's showing up in the browser is coming from our index.html file. That's fine, but the real goal is to use React to render our application. And in this video, we're going to take the first steps towards getting that done. Now, that means we are going to remove the text inside of body, and instead of typing the text here, we're going to create a template over in client-side JavaScript. We're going to define our template and we're going to render it right inside of the body of our page. Now, to kick things off, what I'd like to do is install React, and we're going to do this via a CDN. So I'm going to include a script tag, and that script tag, that is going to load in the React library. Don't worry, later on in the course, you are going to learn how to use Webpack to load in React, React DOM, React Router, Redux, and all of the awesome dependencies that we're going to cover. For the moment, we're just going to use a script tag that's going to allow us to explore React without diving into a ton of configuration. So right here, we're going to create that script tag, and we are going to define the only attribute we need to define, the source. And we're actually going to be loading in two libraries. React comes first. So right here, I have a CDN picked out for us already. That's https://unpkg.com/react by the @15/dist/react.js. Now, I know that was a whole lot of stuff, but I promise we're only going to do this one more time, and then we'll never have to type a URL like that ever again. Andrew from the future with a quick update. This course now supports React v16, so you can actually switch to this URL instead. Everything is going to work exactly the same. You're just going to be loading in v16 of React as opposed to v15. Notice the path has also changed slightly, so make sure to grab this entire URL and swap it out with the source attribute value you just typed. I'm going to take this script tag, copy it, and paste it down below. Now, this is going to load in v15 of React. What we're going to do down below is load in its companion library. That is React-DOM. So React can be used in a ton of different contexts. There's React VR for virtual reality. There's React Native for native applications. In this case, we're trying to use React with the browser. So we're going to get React DOM loaded in as well. That's going to allow us to render our React to the browser, to the DOM. Now, we also want version 15 of this. Inside of the dist folder, we're going to be grabbing react-dom.js. Andrew from the future again. Once again, you are going to want to use React DOM v16 since we're using React v16. So make sure to use this URL instead. So take a quick moment to make sure you have these two script tags in place. Then we're going to go ahead and add a third one. We're going to load in a script that we're actually going to write. So right here, one more script tag. And this source is going to be a whole lot easier than the other ones. We're going to define the local path to this file. So from the root of our web server, / we're going to go into the scripts folder, which doesn't yet exist. That's okay. And we are going to load in a single script, app.js. Excellent. Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and create the scripts folder and app.js. Now, remember, this path is in our HTML. So this path is relative to the public folder, which is the root of our web server. So right here, we'll create a new folder, scripts. And in scripts, we'll add app.js. And this is where we're actually going to have access to all of the features of React and React DOM. For the moment, let's just go ahead and save index.html and make sure everything's loading over inside of the browser. I'm going to do that by cracking open the Chrome developer tools. The Chrome dev tools are fantastic. They're going to allow us to debug and take a look at exactly what's happening with our website behind the scenes, since right now it's showing no content. So it's hard to figure out if it's showing no content because there's no content, or if it's showing no content because something crashed. We can go to settings, more tools, developer tools to crack those open, and I highly recommend memorizing this keyboard shortcut. It is going to come in handy throughout the course and throughout your development career. So right here, we have the dev tools open. Now, you might have opened up to a different page than me. What we're going to do, though, is just go to the console, and this is where we can type some JavaScript and view the output. What we're going to look for is the React variable, which exists, and React DOM, which also exists. So React and React DOM are made available to us only because we included those script tags. These would not be around if we removed those script tags. Now we can actually use the global React and the global React DOM to get some stuff rendered to the screen. And that is exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to do this over inside of the file we just created right here, app.js. So let's kick things off with a little console.log statement. Console.log app.js is running. Right here, I'm just going to add a little message, and that's going to allow us to ensure that the file is actually running. If I save it and go over to the browser, we have app.js is running right here. I'm going to take the developer tools and move them to the bottom real quick. Right here, I can customize exactly where they show up. I'm going to move them on the bottom so I can see the output in the background. Now we can go ahead and switch back over to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to take our very first look at JSX. That is JSX, and it stands for JavaScript. That's the J and the S, XML. So JSX is a JavaScript syntax extension. So it's not part of the core JavaScript language. As you're going to see in a few moments, the syntax is pretty strange at first. It is provided to us by React. So React offers us this great brand new way to define our templates and to inject our data into those templates. And it's one of the many reasons why React is so fantastic. JSX makes working with your templates much easier than it was in the past. Now, you're most likely familiar with other language extensions. If you've ever worked with SCSS or less, those are just language extensions for CSS. Both of those, SCSS and less, add variable support, for example, something that did not exist in CSS and still does not. So these language extensions allow us to extend a language, and that is exactly what JSX is. So let's go ahead and write our very first line. Let's create a new variable, and we can call this variable template. Don't worry, I'm using var here, but we'll look at ES6 const and let in a few videos, and then we'll stop using var altogether. I'm just going to use it for a few videos in the beginning of the course. So we have this variable template, and we're going to set it equal to something. Now, in the past, you might have set it equal to a string, like Andrew, and toss a semicolon at the end. Maybe you set it equal to a number, something like 102. Maybe you set it equal to a Boolean. You have all sorts of expressions you can set this template equal to. But what we're going to do is use JSX. So that's going to look a little weird at first, but don't worry. The whole purpose of this section is to explore this weird new syntax, exactly how it works and all the features it provides us. For now, we're just going to type out the following characters. So we're going to create what looks like the opening paragraph tag in an HTML document. Then we're going to go ahead and close that off with the closing tag. Inside of here, we're going to type some text. This is JSX from app.js. Just a little message. And there we have it. You've actually created your very first JSX expression. This little template is completely static, meaning that there is no dynamic values injected inside of it, but we will look at all of that later. For now, let's just go ahead and focus on getting this very basic one rendered to the screen. Now, we're going to render our little paragraph template down below by using one of the variables we explored in the console, and that one is React DOM. That's uppercase R, uppercase DOM. Now, React DOM has pretty much just one method we're going to be using, and this is React DOM.render. And this is where we are going to render our application. Now, React DOM.render takes two arguments. The first one is the JSX you'd like to render, and we already have that. Right here, we have template. And the second one is the DOM element, where you would like to render it. And we're actually going to create a new div in index.html just for this purpose. So right here inside of body, before all of our script tags, we can make a new div, and we're going to give it an ID, a unique identifier of app. And there we have it. This is basically the final version of our HTML file, even though clearly we have about 3 sections of coding before the app is complete. Almost nothing else is going to happen inside of this file. Now we have our div and we have an ID on that div. We have a unique way to access it. So let's go ahead and actually access it. And we need to pass it in as the second argument to React DOM.render. We can break this out into its own variable up above, another var, and we'll call this one something like approot. and we'll set it equal to, and right here, we're going to use the document API to fetch that element. If you remember, that is document dot. And here we have options. We're going to be using get element by ID. We want to fetch an element by its ID, and we gave the div the ID of app. So right here, inside of quotes, we're going to pass in app. Now we have access to app root, and that is the second and final argument to React DOM.render. Right here, app root. And there we have it. We have our very own little React application. We create a very simple template that we don't understand and know nothing about. Then we fetch our element, and finally we try to render it to the screen. Now let's go ahead and save the file, but be prepared for a bit of disappointment. I'm going to save the file, the browser is going to refresh, and right here we can actually see we're getting an error in the console, and our template is definitely not showing up. Uncaught syntax error, unexpected token, and there we have the less than character. And we can actually click this link to go right over to the place in our source code that's causing the error. And you can see it's clearly where we define our template. Right here, we have our JSX expression, and Chrome and any other browser, it doesn't know what to do with this. It's not part of the JavaScript language. It's an extension. So what we have to do is figure out how we're going to solve this problem. But we're actually going to solve this problem by taking our code with JSX and compiling it down into regular, boring old JavaScript. Now, if you've ever used one of those CSS extensions I mentioned, you know that you write your less code or you write your SCSS code, but in the end of the day, you're still compiling down to regular old CSS that the browser actually understands. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to continue to write code like this throughout the course, but we're actually going to have it compiled down into code that looks nothing like this, and that's what the browser is going to run, because that's what the browser understands. And we're going to do all of this using a tool called Babel. We can look at Babel by going over to babel.js.io. Babel is a fantastic tool. You're going to hear about Babel over and over again in this course. And as soon as you finish this course and move on and you go out and explore and create your own things, you're going to hear about Babel over and over again. Babel is a fantastic tool. It is a JavaScript compiler. Now, the most common use case for Babel is taking features from ES6 and ES7 and compiling them down into ES5 code. So imagine a brand new cool feature comes out in JavaScript, but you have an app that needs to support an old version of IE, for example, maybe IE 9 or 10. IE 9 or 10, they are never going to add a cool new feature like arrow functions, for example. But with Babel, we can write that new code using those new techniques. But in the end of the day, it's ES5 code that's running inside of the browser. So we're going to be using Babel to do the same thing with our ES6 and ES7 code. And we're also going to use Babel to compile our JSX down into boring old ES5 JavaScript. To take a look at this, we can head over to the Try It Out page. The Try It Out page lets us type our code on the left and view the Babel output on the right. You actually can't change this code over here, and you can see that by default we're running in strict mode. We can, however, change the code on the left-hand side. We can, for example, use console.log to log a little message, test. Now, it's not actually going to log this anywhere, but it is going to show the Babel output code. This is the code that would actually run, and clearly nothing's changed. Console.log is a feature your browser does indeed understand. Babel does not need to convert this in any way for it to work. Now let's go ahead and actually type some JSX. So we're going to type out that exact same line we have over inside of our app.js file. We made a variable, template, then we set this equal to a JSX expression. We opened a p tag, we closed a p tag, and we typed some text inside. This is JSX from app.js. Now you can see that we're actually getting something very different over here on the right-hand side. So console.log stays console.log, but our JSX does not stay as JSX. Now the first part did. Creating the template variable and setting it equal to something is indeed still showing up exactly as we typed it. But the JSX code right here, it's gone. It's been replaced with a call to a React method, react.createElement. So this is something that your browser does understand. Your browser obviously understands regular old function calls. So we're going to be using Babel to take our JSX, compile it down into regular old function calls, and these function calls are what's going to be actually running. But we're never going to go ahead and actually write these out. They're super annoying to write, and React wasn't intended to be used like this. React was intended to be used like this. Now let's take a quick look at the arguments. The first argument to React.createElement is the tag, exactly as we typed it over here. If I change that to an H1 in the opening and closing tag, it's going to change to an H1 over here. Let's ignore the second argument for the moment. The third argument is the content. So we have our text showing up. If I change that text to something new, that is exactly what's going to show up over here. Now that second argument, this is the attributes object. So remember how we added an ID onto our div in index.html? Well, we can actually add an ID on here. We're going to look in detail about attributes in JSX later, but for now, we can type out something that we've already seen in HTML. I'm going to set ID equal to some ID, and now we have an object as the second argument with key value pairs, where the key is the attribute name ID and the value is the value. They're showing up here and they're showing up here. So if the browser is never going to understand JSX, how do we get our little example working? Well, in the next video, you're going to install Babel locally. For the moment, we can actually just take this code and copy it and paste it over inside of our editor. Now, this is something that we're never going to do again, but it is going to allow us to see our application working. Let's copy this, switch back over to the application in the browser, and inside of Visual Studio Code, I'm going to comment out the template that uses JSX, and we're going to take the output from Babel. So remember, we put this line in, we got this line out. Obviously, we switched it to an H1, and we have something new, but it's still exactly the same. I'm going to go ahead and save app.js, and right here we have something new showing up in the browser. This is indeed an H1 tag, and it does indeed have the exact text content that we set up. So clearly the browser doesn't understand JSX. It does understand React.createElement calls. So that's what we're going to be using behind the scenes anytime we create a template. Now, this is one of those videos that actually creates more questions than it answers. What exactly is this JSX syntax? How do we do more useful things with it, like create more complex templates? What exactly comes back from React.createElement? We're going to answer all of those questions and more in this section. For now, though, we have successfully gotten a little application showing up. In the next video, you're going to install Babel locally on your machine. So we'll be able to write this code, but have this code run in the browser. And that's what's really going to allow us to get productive with React. Let's take just a few seconds to recap what we did. In this video, we loaded in React and its companion library, React DOM, via script tags. Later on, we'll be loading them in via a different technique using Webpack. Down below, we went ahead and also loaded in a script that we created in the scripts app.js file. This script is very simple. We log a little message, and then we defined some JSX. Now, obviously, the real code that's running is the compiled version. We then have our element selected. This is where we want to put that template. And finally, we use react-dom.render to say we want to render this template in this element in the browser. And that is exactly what happens. Our H1 shows up, and it shows up right inside of our div. We can actually use the elements panel to prove that. I'm going to use escape to toggle the console closed. Right here, we have our div. Inside of the div, we have our H1. Everything shows up correctly. Let's go ahead and continue on to the next video where we're going to automate that process so we can really start creating some cool and useful JSX templates. I'm real excited to get to it.